Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to all of you, and thank on behalf of the Ananta Aspen Center, and thank you for joining us. I think many of you, or most of you, are probably aware, but let me just take a minute to talk about the Ananta Aspen Center. One of our key focus areas at the Ananta Aspen Center is to drive and build what we call values-based leadership in India. As part of this, we run many programs. There are several leadership and values-based programs. Some are in the nature of a public session, like this evening's program, and some others are in the form of some private sessions that we do for dedicated groups of people. Let me introduce myself. My name is Anuj Poddar. Professionally, I work with a company called Viacom18 Media that I hope some of you are aware of. At a personal level, I got associated with the center several years ago as part of a program that they run, that's the ILI program, India Leadership Initiative. The ILI program brings together a group of leaders from different walks of life. These are people that are so-called, in their own mindset, successful people. But it challenges us, so-called successful people, to think beyond our success, to think about how do we move from success to significance. And what do we mean by significance? What do we do for society? What is the impact that we have on society? It challenges our own notion of what success is in our heads and helps us or challenges us to build the good society. What is a good society? To my mind, a society is the collection of people you live amidst. It's the mindsets, it's the thoughts, it's a group of thoughts and minds that you're surrounded by. And how do you shape these minds and thoughts? How do minds evolve? I think the most powerful tool that actually shapes minds is dialogue. I think dialogues really help shape your thoughts and in turn your minds and help build the good society. So today's session is to actually take such a dialogue forward for you. You know, as we live today and all of us have our mobiles, I'm sure most of us are on WhatsApp, many of us on Facebook and Twitter. All of us watch the breaking news every day on television. That's one form of dialogue, and that dialogue is becoming extremely loud and surrounded, or it's a cacophony, as I would call it. Because to my mind, it's good to have that dialogue, but to my mind, it's also becoming very shallow. You know, how much can you write? If you talk to your son through an SMS or Facebook, or, like a post on Facebook or send a Twitter message, 140 characters, there's only so much you can say in that, and there's only so much you can convey. And everybody forms a view based on those 140 characters, based on that half an hour of, the news break, where everybody's really shouting at each other. So I think that's one set of dialogues that we as a society have. But there's an equally important need to have another form of dialogue, which is a dialogue like this. It has to be slightly more substantive. It has to go slightly deeper into issues. It has to talk about issues, real issues that matter to us. And most importantly, it has to make you think. I think the value and the power of a dialogue is when it makes you think. And when it makes you think, that's when you're really taking the benefit of that. So that's our purpose. As Ananta Aspen Center, we are here to try and drive thought leadership. And our definition of thought leadership is if it makes you think, if you go back. And when you go back, I have one request for all of you. I think all of us, we are India, right? We love to have views. All Indians have a lot of views on everything. We know everything. But we come in with a lot of predisposed viewpoints on everything around us. Just come in, listen to the sessions with an open mind, and rethink what you think. And when you go back and rethink what you earlier thought, maybe you'll start thinking something different. So that's all we want to do. We don't want to tell you that think this way. We don't want to tell you think that way. We just want to tell you think and rethink. Okay? And if you do that, I think that's the start of a healthy dialogue that we want to nurture and build upon. So what do we all think about? Or what do I think about? What I hope many of you think about is what do we really aspire to be? What do we want from life? And two words that come to my mind, and hopefully that come to many people's minds, are success and happiness. And many of us probably think that we want to be successful and we want to be happy in life. These are the two goals, ultimate goals in life. Everything else is a means to that end. But what is really success and what is happiness? To answer these questions, I can't think of a better person to have with us this evening. He's a man who's been extremely successful in his career. He's achieved a lot, both in his personal and professional life. And uniquely so, many have been successful. He's a person who set up a company called Happiest Minds. So Mr. Ashok Soota, as most of you probably read his bio, I won't read it all out, but he's been one of the fathers and pioneers of the Indian IT industry. He's been the president of Wipro in its early years and helped shape the whole IT industry through Wipro. He's also been the founding chairman of Mindtree. He today chairs and runs and owns a company called Happiest Minds. He's Besides, his professional bit, he's been very active at industry fora. He's been the president of the CII. He's also been recognized for his contributions and capacity. He's served in the Prime Minister's task force, and his list of achievements go on, so I'm not going to read all of it. But I think that's a great person to have with us today to talk to us about success and happiness. So over to you, Mr. Ashok Soota. Just before he talks to us, a few admin points. So the format we have for this evening, it's on the agenda if you've seen it. He'll talk to us for about 15, 20, 25 minutes, as his session takes. Post that, we'll do a short, brief Q&A session between us and try and bring a little more flavor to the context of what he's been talking about. And then we'll open it up to all of you for questions. I have this request when you ask the questions. It's also being videotaped, so please introduce yourself, and please be clear, and please be brief. And the last point, I know we all love our mobile phones, but you know what to do with them for the next 1 hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I'd like to thank Kiran for giving me this opportunity to be with you all. I want to also in advance thank Anuj, for I know he's done a lot of work which is going to, and advanced thinking which is going to make the next part of our session facilitate the thought processes that he was talking about. I want to particularly thank a lot of my old friends who happen to be here. It's really amazing for me to come. It's almost like an emotional gathering because I have one friend who goes back to 63 years, and I must mention Anant, which goes back all the way to my school days in Agra and Lucknow. And then thereafter, Tarun from 52 years plus, I think now. And then there are a whole bunch of us who started our careers in DCM Group as management trainees. And all of whom who led marvelously successful and happy lives. So I'm not sure what they would particularly get from me in terms of this topic, but maybe the dialogue that we have later will certainly give some takeaways to all of you. And then, therefore, finally, thanks to all of the audience. I'm looking forward to the dialogue. I think with the proposed, with the thoughts and issues which will come up during the process, I'm sure that will give us all some takeaways, and I'm looking forward to some myself, to do what Anuj said, and that is to change your thought processes on your perspectives as you come into this. So let me start with one thing about, the subject is for today's success and happiness, and it may seem like these are actually two seemingly diverse subjects, and why are they being kind of clubbed together? And in that context, I do also want to say, those of you, and I'm sure you read the invite, essentially I do want to say that I disagree with what's written up there for a start. So that's not my thesis, in case you came to it with that mindset. What it says is that the talk is going to discuss the challenge of seeking a balance between success and happiness. And it also says that when people are successful, they feel and experience happiness. Now, I'm not totally disagreeing with the second part of it, but I think it's more complex than that. Or maybe not complex, actually it's simpler but different, certainly a different perspective which I hope to be able to get across during the course of our discussion today. So I'd like to start today though by asking the audience two questions. Now, I must caution up front that you can't give a completely objective answer to this. In fact, you don't even have the database to give an answer accurately to what I'm going to ask you. And yet, it's based on a certain self-perception and a mindset of how you see your own response to those two questions. So, and in this, it is a comparative question. Both of them are comparative questions. I'd like you to make your comparison set with people who I'd say are of similar background. It becomes easier to do that. That means people who had the same opportunities. For example, all of us from the DCM Shriram group would certainly say that we've got a similar background. And likewise, or for that matter, Anant and I, because we had the same education in a sense. So, so the first question is that visualize your own self, and I'd like a show of hands on that. And that is, how do you see yourself in terms of being successful? And those who see themselves, and you're comparing yourself, as I said, with similar people, in the, say, top 20% of all the people you've known in terms of success. And please don't be, as I said, it's not possible for you to give an accurate answer, but do give, don't be overly modest, I'd say, in raising your hand on this one. So I'd love to get people to respond to that first question. So how many of you see yourselves as being amongst the top 20% successful in people with almost similar backgrounds? And here again, it may be similar educations, it may be similar opportunities as you went through life, and how you therefore availed of them. And that is actually the way. I think spouses of people who ran very successful careers, Ranjana, are allowed to raise their hands along with their husbands, because they could never have achieved what they did without the spouse. So, can I get a show of hands? I'm sure there are many more than that. So people are being, Ranjana, you can certainly raise your hand on behalf of Tarun. I notice all my friends here from the Shriram group being overly bashful. Anuj, I'm sure you could raise your hand too. Quite a few being very modest about it. So I'm somewhat, my own guess is if it's a purely random audience, I should have got about a 20% response. It isn't, of course, random, but I would have thought that in this audience, so people have been somewhat circumspect in claiming success, that you're probably much more than 20%. So that's fair enough. Incidentally, I must add, I said earlier that we had in the group 4 old friends from 50 years, starting with our careers. There's a 5th gentleman now. So we've become 5 into 50, which is very good. And so now the next corollary question is, on a scale for same issues, similar type of background, similar issues, and I notice we've got a fairly mature audience, youngsters, so you can assess how your life has been. I wouldn't say no youngsters, but mostly not youngsters. There are quite a few who take objection, I'm sure. Now, so how do you see yourselves on the scale of happiness? And how many of you would count yourselves amongst the top 20% in people of similar profiles? And again, I could request for a little show of hands. Okay, a few. Many more now. That's very interesting to hear. That's super. Actually, that's rather heartwarming for me, I must say, because it's not that I've done this before, but if I test this out in other type of smaller random groups, I get a response which is a flip of what we've seen today. Now, can I request that if there were some of you who put your hands up for success, but not for happiness, would you like to just share what was in your mind when you gave that response? But I think everybody who said success was also happy here, as far as I can see. So your theme of saying that success leads to happiness seems to be borne out. Was there anybody who's had a hand up for success but never raised their hands for happiness? Not a single one. So then maybe anybody who did talk about success, what were the thoughts which were in your mind when you did raise your hand? Could I request for a couple of volunteers? There are quite a few people who should have raised their hands but didn't, but that's another matter. Do say your name, etc.
My name is Dr. Amod Kumar. I have been heading the Department of Community Health in St. Stephen's Hospital, okay. And now I have moved into the business after taking sabbatical. So success, I thought that I've been pretty successful in my batch, and I mean 2 batches, I mean 1 batch above and one batch down. In being able to do whatever I mean, as a professional, I should have done, being a good doctor, being able to raise the department to a certain level, and I can talk a lot about what I have achieved so far. So that way, I've been very successful.
Super. Thanks, God. One more example on somebody who would like to say as you thought of success, what came to your mind?
My name is Naresh Sagar. I have been an employer since, I left my graduation. Now, I have a different story, sir. When I see the success, I fear my success. And when you achieve a success, you don't have anything other to do. So success is not that all happiness. Success sometimes brings depression also.
No, but I'm going to give you, you're
Just
getting
give me
into
one
issues
more
which might come through in our dialogue.
Yeah.
I'm actually asking you, if you raised your hand to say you were successful, what went through your mind in describing yourself as being successful?
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Once you enter in any part of a field to which you have never entered and you find yourself being appreciated, it's a part of your success. Even if you have not played any game, and if you start playing that game exceedingly well, it becomes your success.
So what your response is that what you did led to appreciation of the work you've done,
or
and
excellence.
that appreciation you interpret as success.
Excellence when you achieve amongst your
So excellence
colleagues.
in what you
That's right.
set out to do. So that's great. Can I take the flip side on happiness? And here there were many more, so maybe I get a couple of volunteers here. So those of you who talked about and saw yourselves as being amongst the top 20 most happiest people, what do you sense, what was going through your mind when you raised your response? Please go ahead, sir.
The name is V.K. Sharma. Happiness to me has been getting a good sleep every day. And that happens, whatever be the problem, I'm able to do my best that day. And that's the end of the matter. I don't worry whether it will be successful or failure or no. I have done my best and I get a good sleep.
That's a terrific response. Couple more, please. There's a young gentleman here.
Hello, I'm Anshuman Sood. I'm a lawyer. I didn't pick up my hand for success.
Okay.
Because I thought success, we related with money mostly sometimes. So maybe we have achieved, maybe we haven't. But happiness is more with us individually. And if you have a happy family, you're able to do what you want. So that happiness, I think I have achieved.
Yeah. That's good. That's a nice response. What's your name again?
Anshuman Sood.
Anshuman. Okay, thanks, Anshuman. And one more, and then we have a gentleman there at the back.
For last 23 years, I have very strongly, impacted lives of people whom I have been serving very closely in the slums I used to work. So I can see several faces who, I can be very proud of. Some kids are doing their own business, they have set up their own offices. And kids who have not, who would have otherwise gone homeless, they're, taken care of well. So, and the family, I feel always kind of blessed and protected. And as if God is using me for, I see many of the accidents happening, so I'm one of the, so otherwise I would not be there, and I'll not be having that kind of satisfaction of being able to help.
Well, fine.
So
Thank
that
you
way,
Sure.
the
I think that's a good
impact so
example.
far on the society.
You're from the social sector.
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
And
great.
for homeless, I have done a great deal of work. So
Thank you. So we've got quite a few interesting perspectives which I believe will help me to bring out a certain thought process and thesis which I want to leave behind. Let me, for one moment, since there are two specific themes, success and happiness, give you a few dictionary meanings of those words as compared to, and they will relate to the experiences which all of you have just brought out in different ways. So in success, and there are three different dictionaries they are from. One is the fact of getting or achieving wealth, respect, or fame. Second definition, the accomplishment of an aim or a purpose. Third one is the achievement of something desired, planned, or attempted. Now, on happiness, happiness here is, it's a mental or emotional state of well-being defined by positive or pleasant emotions ranging from contentment to intense joy. I'm not saying I agree or disagree at this point of time with any one of these, maybe a combination of several of these. Second is the quality of state of being happy. Third is an interesting one, I think. It says happiness is a fuzzy concept and can mean many different things to many different people, so, which is true. So success is obviously that much more black and white. But if you really look at these definitions, and partially I'd say the examples we got here, not necessarily totally so, but success people tend to think of as either careers or material wealth. So this gentleman did not raise his hand on success because they haven't made tons of money, but you may have been in your own relative way quite successful, at least in comparison with people with similar opportunities at your age group. Happiness is much more about life. And if I were to just summarize that in a very different way, but I'll come back to much more because, as we said, it's a fuzzy complex. I think it needs to be better understood. Coming down to success, I'd like to now give you a little bit more of a different approach to the way I think of success. And I think where, if you're able to look at it in that way, it doesn't become so much an issue of balancing success and happiness as the paper laid out. So in my view, success is more than just financial success. It's really about achieving your own potential and then continuously raising the bar on that potential. I should explain that. I mean, if you, for example, as a student, if everybody set themselves the goal of saying, I want to be the #1 student in the class, then there's going to be one successful student, and corollary, if you didn't achieve that, unhappy, 90 others as you go ahead. But if on the other hand, you said you've done your very best as per your own potential, which is what I think this gentleman was saying. I'm happy when I know I've done the best I could possibly do. And, but however, it's, what I'd like to increase as a dimension to this is that success is not just material and careers. I believe it's about fulfilling also your own potential for learning, your potential for caring and helping others, and most importantly, your own potential for happiness. This self-assessment, I believe, can be recalibrated from time to time. Let me now come to the fuzzy concept of happiness. Here again, I'd like to start with what has certainly been a big driver for Happiest Minds when we have created a company with that name. And I'll quote to you here Aristotle. He says that happiness is the meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. I think that, to my mind, that is absolutely key. If you begin to think of that, then everything else begins to fall in place after that. Another very important one is that happiness is a choice. It's a personal choice. It's not correlated to wealth. There are tons of examples of unhappy, wealthy persons and persons with so little and who are really exceedingly happy in their lives. And talking in terms of material success, people in the social sector, you'll find a lot more happiness there. And that's also because of one other feature of happiness. And that is, it is maximized in your moments of giving. Just look back on your lives. You'll find that your true periods of happiness are the periods when you gave and not when you received. An increment you received, a promotion received, those led to what I'll call as brief periods of joy. After that, that fades away and you begin to look for the next jump. But it is really the lasting moments of warmth and happiness come from the moments that you give. There's another aspect, and that is that it's not something to be pursued or chased. I think it should be something which engulfs and surrounds you. In this context, I'm going to give you a very nice quotation from Ruskin Bond. He said that happiness is elusive as a butterfly, which should never be pursued, but if you stay still, it may come and settle on your hand. However, he then adds that this will still be a very brief encounter because he's likening it to a butterfly though, and we must savor those moments, and for they will not come very often. However, this is where I disagree with him. I think that if you make it a way of life, if you let it really truly engulf you, then it should be a warm glow which is with you all the time. So yes, it is not something to be pursued. It is something that you allow to settle on you and surround you, and yet certainly need not be fleeting or temporary. I think that happiness should not be trivialized and confused with what I call as spikes of joy and even troughs of disappointment. It is a mindset. One other important thing I must tell you about happiness is that people don't invest enough in what really makes them happy. And therefore, when they look back on their lives, they find that they have regrets. And this is again based on research. A person called Dr. Bronnie Ware, who sat with people who were in a stage of terminal illness and asked them what were their regrets. And then they identified that they truly had not invested or spent their time on the things which would have made them happy. For a brief moment, and this is not intended to be at all a talk about Happiest Minds, but I must tell you that having named the company as Happiest Minds, I thought I could discuss with you a little bit about how we've gone about it and our approach to happiness at Happiest Minds. So, you know, we have the simplest mission statement. It's happiest people, happiest customers. But there's a very big difference in these two statements, in the intent behind them. For people, we say, we are here to help enable that, to create perhaps an environment to make you conscious about what is happiness. But we are not going to make you happy. That's not our goal. That's your choice. We can't make anybody happy. It is a personal choice. We move away from that, the onus is on us. Anytime there's a small policy, then say, hey, you call yourself Happiest Minds, but we are not happy with it. But that's how they respond is their choice. And the same thing will happen to you in other incidents in life. There may be traumatic incidents. How you respond is really a personal choice. But for customers, there is an implicit promise. For customers, the implicit promise is, one, that happiest people should lead to happiest customers. And it says that we will deliver to you an experience which would make you happiest customers. How do we go about it? Very briefly, I think it really comes through a few practices and rituals that we develop. First of it is, again, based on the research, where people look back on their lives and regret because they don't know what makes them happy. So whenever a person joins Happiest Minds, we ask them to articulate what makes me happy. Then we ask them to take stock of what have they done on that score themselves during the course of the year. So everybody writes that up. That's announced when a person joins, and we put these up on walls, etc., also for people to see that these are the issues which people need to be continuously investing on. The second one is linked to this whole point of happiness when you give. So whenever we achieve what we call, instead of landmarks or milestones, we call them as smilestones. So we celebrate those with acts of giving. We give 50 meals towards this is the government's Akshay Patra program, where we would give 50 meals in the name of each of our team members, each Happiest Mind as we call them, and 100 in the name of each customer. We've set ourselves a goal of reaching 1 million meals by the time we go public, which is hopefully another 3 to 4 years from now. We've reached 350,000. Hopefully there'll be more and more milestones, and we celebrate that. So instead of everybody saying, let's have a big party, we've done $50 million this quarter, we'd say, that's fine. I mean, we can have small parties on certain occasions. But really celebrate this through an act of giving. And people, it brings a lot of pride, I must tell you, to people. The third is beginning meetings with an expression of gratitude. All of us have so much to be grateful about, but we don't remember. You enter into your morning's meeting and say, I'm going to be questioned about God knows how many different issues, targets, what's missing, and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot to be grateful about, and I think it's important to begin that and recount that and get a few people into, therefore, a positive mindset of what do we feel really happy and positive about. I think it's a great thing to begin that if you can during the day. You may or may not have noticed it, but I did begin my meeting today with expressing my gratitude here. And the other thing is, and this is a new one, which I think we really have to, you know, we have a very unusual position in our company called Happiness Evangelist. I believe we must be the only company in the world which has that role. She's very well qualified. She is a PhD in well-being. And however, what we've said is that, since happiness is a personal choice, she can't be going around making people happy. That's not it. And therefore, the extension of that thought process is that all of us have to be happiness evangelists for ourselves, for our customers, for society, and all of those who we come in contact with. Therefore, we've actually said that your personal happiness is your choice. We can't thrust it on you. But because happy people spread happiness, therefore it's everybody's role to be a happiness evangelist. Now, to be able to emphasize the importance of that and how we truly believe in it, we have a variable pay scheme which up till now was linked entirely to profits and growth and so on and so forth, like most variable pays are. We have now earmarked 20% out of that to saying that everybody, and that includes from me onwards, will be assessed on a 360 degrees basis by the team on where they see you as a happiness evangelist. So 10 questions have been drawn up, people get assessed, and based on that, they will be assessed on happiness evangelism. The idea is to really spread happiness. Now, let me come to what's common between achieving success and happiness. First, I'd say is to pursue your passion, whatever it is. If you're really doing what you enjoy, I think you're going to find that you truly are going to be successful and being happy. And in this context, a phrase which I really dislike is work-life balance. It seems to imply that work is a drudgery and the rest of it is life. And we spend more than half of our lives one way or the other in work. I think what is really important, there's a lovely phrase. In fact, I have to attribute this to one of my ex-colleagues. And he says that your prakriti and pravriti are to be in alignment, which really means that one's nature and the work you're doing need to be in alignment to lead a harmonious and a happy existence. Now, there's a very interesting thought here, and that is that, all of us have certain competencies, but when we set out to do certain roles, certain jobs, how often have we thought that how well do my own skills fit into particularly the roles and requirements of that? And when you find that they do, that's when you're going to have harmony both in your work as well as in your life. The third one is a mindset of creating a problem into an opportunity. And here there's a very interesting one, which again research which shows that 75% of people apparently will go through what you'll call as a traumatic experience in their lives. And yet when they've been questioned about it, a very large majority of them found a lot of positives emerging out of their trauma. And that is a phenomenon called as post-traumatic growth. I must confess I led what I thought was a truly completely blessed, lucky life. I never had any reason to believe I had any such concern to learn from, until two of them came in very rapid succession, and the objective is not to get into details. But both of them, when I look back on them, I really believe were tremendous blessings in disguise. And in a way, it was also then a question of saying, how do you look at any problem and convert it into an opportunity? Certainly one of them, I can tell you, led into my becoming a serial entrepreneur. The third one is a sense of well-being, and physical health becomes very important in that one. Therefore, I think it becomes an obligation for all of us to see what you do in terms of sustaining that. Now, I should also caution here that, look, bad health can, in spite of the best habits, strike any one of us. Today, as all of us get older, you've got higher propensities for cancers, for heart attacks, so many other illnesses. And yet, I'll tell you, there are innumerable examples of people who then never let that setback impact their happiness. I'll tell you about a lady called Malti Hulla, who was paralyzed from the waist downwards at a very young age. But she developed her upper body. She's gone on to win more than 100 medals at different international events. We had her over at a prize-giving ceremony for a marathon race we ran once. And I asked her how she thought of herself, and she said, I'm the happiest person in the world. So that's completely unprompted response on that. Another person I've had a pleasure of personally meeting, you may have heard of a lady called Sheena Iyengar. She's written one of the most amazing books called The Art of Choosing. She became blind at the age of about 13. She's today a professor at University of Columbia. And apart from the fact that she's written this book, she demonstrates this art of choosing whereby she helps people who both she knows and even otherwise, apart from her professional work, in doing interior design work. Now, you might imagine that somebody who is not able to see is actually successfully able to contribute to very excellent interiors. The third one, which I thought was really amazing because, and I just came across this in the Outlook last week, having just come back from a paragliding trip, Tarun, at Bir a little while back. And there's a gentleman called Divyanshu Ganatra who got glaucoma at the age of 17. And he is now the first solo paraglider, not assisted paragliding like I did, where you've got a trainer behind you. Solo paraglider from the country. He's on his own, he can't see. Of course, there's a help from technology, but he actually goes out. You might say, good Lord, he could land on top of a tree or not take off at the right time, and that would be fatal. But you can imagine how much satisfaction and happiness people have got by overcoming those deficiencies or disabilities. Then I would talk about another aspect for success and happiness is what I'll call as honest self-assessment and self-awareness. I'm going to now move on, and actually I'm going to really wrap this up because I think we should move on to our dialogue in interest of questions. However, I'd like to just conclude by saying overall, and coming to what is really my own thesis, I'd like to take you into something which came through from a very surprising source. I don't know, many of you would have read or heard about Clayton Christensen. He is one of the best and most renowned professors in Harvard Business School. He's the author of The Innovator's Dilemma and The Innovator's Solution. But he's also a very deeply spiritual person. And one of the things that he asks in one of his essays on the subject is, how would you measure your life? And in a sense, the issue that I've been really raising with you is, are you going to measure it in context of either the careers you've built, the millions you've earned, or are you going to measure it in terms of the good you've done for others and how you have, in a sense, maximized and spread happiness as you went along? And finally, again, bringing you back to the Aristotle quote of happiness being the meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. In effect, the thesis of my talk really here was that success without happiness is not success. And therefore, the two really actually converge in the context of saying that what really counts is a truly happy life. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Soota. So I'm going to do a few questions before I turn it over to all of you in the audience. Mr. Soota, I think that was an extremely enlightening talk, and I think you had a lot of descriptions or definitions from the dictionary, from other people. I want to delve a little into your personal journey and your personal life. And I'm sure, today as you stand and share these views with us, your views on success and happiness would have changed in the course of your own journey. So can you correlate for us your journey or some key milestones and how that's helped shape your views on this? Just to add another element to that, I don't know if you have children, how do they think? Do they necessarily agree with you today? Or I think they may be in a different phase of their life. And it's a journey that they have to experience for themselves, because they will not necessarily listen to preaching, but they will have to.
But I'll take the last one up first, because you've obviously, while you've done a fair bit of research, you may or may not know, and this may seem like a little anomaly that I'm talking here about happiness in a sense, and I happen to be a single person. But I'll tell you there's a big advantage on that. No, there's nothing to be sorry about. I'm quite happily single also. But having said that, I have got lots and lots of nieces and nephews, and I'll tell you one other big plus about that. People listen to their uncles much more than they listen to their parents. So I can really dialogue with them. So do they agree or do they not agree? It's seldom that we have this sort of a philosophical discussion with them. As you can see, there are not too many very young people in an audience like this. And that is why actually we are talking to our people and making them aware of what makes them happy now. Because they begin to think of it in a much later time frame, whereas they should be really thinking of it much earlier. Now, coming down to, you talk about milestones, and again, I had not really intended this to be so much of a talk on personal, but I'll talk of success here much more in the material context and happiness also, in what led into some of my own thought process. I think on success, and I think many of my colleagues, the 5 into 50 I talked about here, I think we must all acknowledge that we had, I think, the benefits of having one of the best trainers who gave enormous responsibilities to all of us at a very young age, and that's Dr. Chardram. And that brings you on to another thing, and that luck plays a huge part. If I were to talk of all the luck I've had in my life, and therefore also think of it with gratitude, but I would also add to that, that you do have a role to play in making your luck. So I think that's the issues on, on the success side. I think decision making is also important on success. I can certainly say this, I only changed my job twice in my life. The first one was a huge salary reduction, and I gave up the fact that I got a car the year I started working. And the second one was to join a company which was 1/7 of the size of the company I was leading. But clearly there were decisions made, keeping a view towards the future. The thing on happiness, I think that's been in a journey I think I went through several stages. Firstly, self-assessment, and I talked about that. I took this up at a fairly early stage. Right in my first 2-3 years of working, I drew up something. We didn't have an appraisal system in our company at that time. But it was my own form of looking at myself. But that led into self-awareness in a much deeper way, in a more spiritual way, if I may say. And that was largely influenced by a book called Wellsprings. It's written by a Jesuit priest called Anthony de Mello. And I think the exercises in are just fantastic. So the first one, for example, says if you visualize that your life is coming to an end and you look back on it and you look back on your life and you ask yourself several questions. Like one of them was, what is your unfulfilled desire? And when I answered that question in honesty, I said the one unfulfilled desire was to become an entrepreneur. Second was to write a book, which I still haven't done. But so I think that process of self-awareness which came, and then the journey towards actually beginning to think about happiness itself. And I think this was evolving. It was a really natural movement and found expression in the fact that we created Happiest Minds.
Okay. In the opening bit, when you asked some questions on people's views on success and happiness, and the gentleman there said he's happy because he gets good sleep. And that's making me think, there's happy and there's successful. And I was trying to think about when we think of who do we idolize. So let's remove it from us to when we look at icons or heroes. Typically, if you agree with me, most of our heroes or icons are people who are successful. We idolize them because they're successful. He's Dhoni, he's Prime Minister, he's head of a company, etc. We rarely idolize people simply because they're happy. So I'm trying to delve into what is the definition of success. And is it necessary that it's people who achieved fame, achieved monetary success, achieved a position of power? Sure. Society only views them as successful people? Or is it your school teacher who's probably not known by anybody outside your circle? Or is it your father or your mother or somebody from your family? Sure. So why is success in the larger societal context looked upon or a tag given to these immensely iconic people and not necessarily simple people?
And I suppose the answer to that is very simply that one is visible and the other is not. I mean, frankly, even here, it's very difficult for somebody to say that these are the happy people. I think there's perhaps a different angle to this, is that what we as society should value more and recognize more. And that is happening. So today, people do value and recognize people in the social sector. You realize how much they're doing. You'll see, if nothing else, they become the icons through the international awards that they become eligible for. I mean, sometimes it takes an international award for us to realize what's happening in our country and who are the people. They truly become icons overnight, And so there is an awareness about that. And yet, of course, the more visible ones are your political leaders and the people. Whether they're happy in their lives or not, frankly, who knows?
Okay. So let me flip it over. We've only spoken about success and happiness. Let's talk about failure. I think to understand success, we need to understand failure.
Okay.
One of the examples to my mind comes is Steve Jobs. I think his biggest learning came from failure, not necessarily from success. And learning for all of us came from his failures and other people's failure.
Sure.
Can I ask you to delve back into your personal journey? What were your moments of failure which put you into
Sure.
a dilemma or which you learned from?
Sure. Actually, there are 2-3 questions almost into the same thing. But one thing I'll tell you, and I actually disagree with you on your observation on Steve Jobs. Again, this is research which says that you should, all the management books will tell you that you should learn more from your failures. They're very important. And of course you should. You should certainly try to avoid repeating the same mistake over and over again. But I actually believe, and this is what research shows, that it's far better to learn from your successes than your failures. And that is because your successes then point you to your core competencies, your capabilities. You build on them, and therefore you think with an expansionist mindset. The more you dwell on your failures, the more you're going to get gloomy about them, and more you're going to get diffident and take a little hesitation to take a risk. I think that, and therefore from that angle, I think that's a perspective which I come in. Failures, I think in the course of a career, there are really dozens of them. And if I were to think of one where I obviously didn't learn, is that I've had 6 experiences of appointing a country head in the UK who flopped. And it's a very expensive decision in context of opportunity cost. But again, I can't pinpoint what it is because it was a people decision which led into finding a successful country head for a given geo. I think the issue also about what leads to failure in terms of experience, I think is really, firstly is the fear of failure in itself, and an ability to take balanced risks is what I would say. Coming back to Steve Jobs, the fact is that Steve Jobs was a genius. His failure, if you ask me, there was not the mistake. The big plus was that he probably had a benefit of looking back at the years, not what he did wrong. What he did wrong was frankly bringing in Scully, who then got him out of the system, and maybe Scully did him a great benefit because that gave him the opportunity to go out and look at things with a perspective, not with a view of saying, what was it that I did wrong? Because I think he did more of what he did well, in a dramatic way. What he did with the Mac, he then repeated with the phone and multiple other new genres of products he created.
So let me push the envelope a little more on that. Let's say he had no failures, or anybody else for that matter. If you only had a string of successes, is there pitfalls of being only successful? Is that a dangerous place where you can tend to become arrogant or you can lose the plot? Or can that counter the achievement of happiness at some point?
Firstly, again, it has to be a hypothetical question because nobody could have no failures. But of course, one of the seeds for failure after success is arrogance. So the moment you lose your humility, you lose the fact that yes, there are hazards around, you don't acknowledge all that the system has helped to do to make you successful. Seeds for failure. So able to keep that balance towards avoiding, in a sense, the next failure.
Let me come to happiness. In your talk, you mentioned happiness is can happiness be taught?
Okay, that's obviously an interesting one. I think happiness hopefully can be inculcated as a mindset, which is what we are seeking out to do. We are not seeking to teach. But having said that, interestingly enough, there is a professor who is introduced simultaneously, an Indian professor, I forget the name. In the Indian School of Business today, there's a 6-week course on happiness, and he runs the same program in the University of Texas. I could, for anybody who's interested and wants to enroll, I'd be happy to provide you that. So certainly he does believe that happiness precepts can be taught. And then after that, I think you've got to live life.
So let me move the happiness discussion back away from just the individual to a society or to a country. And there's, for example, there's Bhutan, which as its measure of success or growth has not GDP, which is economy, but gross index of happiness. There's famously all the Scandinavian countries which are known to be happy countries.
Sure.
So is happiness always a function of human individual choice, or is it a function of how the society collectively deals with its issues, deals with happiness, deals with its outlook to life?
Sure. You know, when you come to societies, firstly, I'm very wary of these surveys because you're comparing, you know, the words themselves are so complex. As we've seen, it's a fuzzy concept. When you go to this, happiness means different things to different people. When you run these surveys, I think you come up with very distorted results. I think in terms of a base, there's probably more similarity between somebody in Bangalore and Silicon Valley than there is between Bangalore and rural Karnataka. And to ask the same question and come up with an index and say that India is 130th on the happiness index, I think is very misleading. I think for societies, what really counts, if you ask me, is how much social capital are we building? What is it that we are doing which is, in a sense, leading to positive attitudes? And I think before we even begin to measure happiness in that sense, I find it very difficult to say what would be the gross national happiness of our country, like say Bhutan is set out to do, maybe an easier job for them. The UK is, I think, on its way towards doing that. In a country like ours, where we have people who seem to have some of the strangest priorities, we have so much violence against women, discrimination against people on basis of so many different categories of individual preferences they get discriminated against. You've got somebody whose major priority in life is to come in power and then, okay, I'll ban beef one day. Somebody who's talking about, making India into a Hindu nation. I think if you have those sort of priorities, you're only going to create a negative mindset in the society. That's not going to build social capital. I think what we really need to do is to first build the social capital. I think happiness will follow after that. So we've really got a long way to go as a society. At an individual level, I think is the issues I've already talked about.
Sure, thank you. It's 6 p.m., so I'm going to extend this by about 10 to 15 minutes to give all of you a chance. So it's over to all of you. Questions from the audience, please. And I have a request, like I said, please introduce yourself briefly and please come directly to the question briefly.
Anand Trivedi is the name. Just want to take on from something which Ashok was saying earlier on about a book he read at the very start. I think it's very important to achieve success, to be able to analyze yourself, to be able to introspect and say, look, what are my potentials? See, a lot of people fail to do that, don't even go down that route, and therefore they probably never aim for success or are able to achieve it. So that's a very, very important factor. And if you realize it early in life, then you're on the path to success. I totally agree about what gives you happiness. I mean, I retired to India after having lived abroad. And the whole objective was to give to society. And I find that I'm getting far more happiness by doing things for others and seeing a glow on their face than, measuring your own success. Sure. There comes a point in life where you have achieved everything. You have a roof over your head, you can buy the clothes, the cars you want and everything. What more do you want? Let's make others happy. Going to society is what this is about. And that's what makes me happy.
Sure. And Anant, I think the point though that I was trying to make is that you don't need to come to that process even at the end of your life. I mean, it can be done as you go
along. Should be early, yeah.
And which is why I emphasize that it is really this act of giving, which you're doing in abundance now, which could really have become a way of life. And our youngsters don't think of that early enough, which is what we are really trying to accomplish.
You're right, yeah.
After.
I feel two things are very paramount for setting a foundation for happiness. That is, one is love for others and surroundings. If we are able to kind of look at things with compassion, whether they're our servants, the person who is hitting on the car, or or an employee who is not performing well. So if we have kind of compassion and love for that, then perhaps we are in a better situation to handle that.
Sure.
So love is a paramount, that is very important. And for giving also, I mean, when we are giving, we should be giving with love. The second very important thing is truthfulness. Lot of unhappiness is arisen because of the person not being truthful in dealings, and then he has to hide and he remains uncomfortable, and he causes kind of anxiety to others also. So the truth, remaining truth for very, very simple things, like telling your wife, where are you right now? Or, you know, whatever you do. I think that brings a lot of happiness. I mean, at least that kind of avoids unnecessary, you know, troubles which we invite for. So,
You know, I'd agree with you on what you've just said.
Love,
and I think those characteristics that you've highlighted for happiness, I think are very important. Certainly both love and truthfulness. I'd like to add a little bit more because, you know, it is, there are going to be multiple, and again, nobody can be all embracing in the answer. But I believe some of the other characteristics to develop or emotions to nurture for happiness, to my mind, include passion, resilience, forgiveness. I think that's very important. The forgiveness one is really an important one to be able to, and also to avoid, if you ask me for happiness, are things like envy, anger, greed, and hatred. So there are certain characteristics that you need to either watch out for yourself, both in terms of what you're developing and what you're avoiding.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to, so that I can see a lot of hands so that everybody gets to speak. Sir, you please.
My name is Deepak Singh. I have two questions. One is, what motivated you to name your company Happiest Minds? What was the objective behind it? I presume that the company has a lot of happy minds. Has it helped the company in growing faster than other companies which probably presumably do not have this particular motto in their existence? Secondly, about happiness as such, I get the feeling that people in our parents' age were generally leading a happier life and were more happier. I think in today's age, perhaps that quotient of happiness has gone down. Is that a correct statement or a wrong statement?
Yeah. You know, take the last one, Deepak. It's very difficult to say how happy they were versus how happy all of us are, or how happy our next generation is going to be. My personal belief is that just as people get brighter and brighter, I think with the right mindset, people may also get happier as things grow and develop. But there is another angle on age, and that is how happiness changes with age. Now again, there's a different nature of happiness. I think there's a little bit more of excitement at a younger age, which gets associated. There's maybe more adrenaline associated with the happiness. Whereas happiness, as all of us age, becomes much more sense of calmness. I think that, and I believe that that characteristic probably held for a generation ahead of us and will probably hold for the future. Coming down to the company, I think it was just that I had really been evolving myself as I went along, and I named it Happiest Minds. It was sheer luck that I could get both the URL in, because you can't today start a company if you can't get the URL Happiest Minds. That the registrar approved the name, so lo and behold. And I must also say, having called my last company Mind Tree, almost anything I did, although the words are completely different. Mind Tree was very cerebral. It means Mano Vriksha in the Upanishads, springs from the mind. Whereas this is very emotional, you know, it's about happiness. But all the names I came up with ended with minds. Luckily, I got Happiest Minds. I put it up as my first choice to the registrar. It got cleared. But it was a thought process evolving ever since I think, read this book on Wellsprings. Now, how has it helped us as a company? You know, it's very difficult to pinpoint. And in that context, I would actually say one reason I never read management books per se is that if somebody is writing on implementation, then they will say if you implement well, then all your problems will be solved. I think I'd be somewhat deceptive if I were to go and say that because we focused on happiness, we've actually delivered growth which is faster than any Indian IT services company by far in a 3-year time frame. But it would be wrong of me to attribute it to the focus on happiness. It had to be a mix of things. So I can't take that danger. It is important. I believe it plays a huge role. But I think there have to be 100 other things that we've hopefully done right.
Thank you. This gentleman and then you.
Samir Walia, I'm an Aspen Fellow and an entrepreneur. Two questions, quick questions. One is, you alluded to the role of luck and the fact that you could actually make luck work for you if you work hard for it. So what has been your experience in your personal journey with serendipity? The second question is taking on from the question right now, is that in your company, do you find that your retention rates and your customer stickiness, two very key things in IT services company, are better than peers? And therefore, does it really vindicate your entire effort to infuse happiness in the company?
Sure.
Thank you.
On the second one, even if we hadn't quite had, let us say, end results in terms of hard numbers, I would say it vindicates, because it's a belief. You set out to do it as an end in itself. You're not necessarily looking for a material gain, even in terms of success or growth. Because we believe that's important. That's what we really want. We want our people to look back on their lives and say that I focused on happiness, and I actually led a happier life as a result, that we made them aware of it. I actually see that as an end in itself. That's, the rest of it is a byproduct. Let success come, let lower attrition rates, and of course we get our share of those. There's no question about it. Has it led to better customer stickiness? Again, all I can say is that even as a young company, we've got 100 wonderful customers today, 3 years. Again, it would be wrong for me to attribute, just going back to Deepak's question here, to all of that to saying that it was the happiness focus that we did. So it's basically that. Totally a series of coincidences. I won't go into them, except to tell you that an old friend of mine from Roorkee, who I met after 19 years, met Mr. Premji a few months later. And Mr. Premji happened to ask him, do you know somebody in the IT industry who could run an IT company? And he gave him my name. And I met this guy in America. Now, that's about as lucky as it could be. And I wasn't even interested in the thing. I wouldn't even give him a resume to start with, because I said, what am I going to do running? If he'd advertised for the job, I would not have applied. If I'd applied, he'd have probably rejected me. So he got this name through here. But then where do you make your luck? I mean, obviously, I got the door opener through there. I don't think anybody would know. I talked about Dr. Charitram as one of my earliest bosses in terms of ability to give people enormous responsibility. And there's one person who can get into more detail than anybody else. And because he thinks his CEO decision is the most important one, is Mr. Premji. In one single interview of his, and it wasn't the only one, was 14 hours. So there had to have been some substance behind to follow that luck. So it was luck and making your luck.
Thank you. Sir.
I'm Arvinda Brara, Chairman and Managing Director of Mantech Consultants, good friend of Ashok. Just wanted to bring in two elements between success and happiness. And those are that to be really happy, you have to control your wants. I mean, the ideal happiness state is that you have no needs whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And the other element is belief in God. So how do you figure these two into your range of success and happiness?
Yeah, no, this is very interesting. So one is, you said needs to be minimized, and the other one is, of course, belief in God. There's one, let me just, and the tricky ones, the moment you get into religion, you've got something to be careful that you don't hit into a minefield. I do believe that people with very deep religious faith is a great sense of happiness and satisfaction to them. Where I'm against it is where you have in a religion which says you're only going to be salvaged or get salvation, or you'll go, if you're in this particular religion, you're assured of going into heaven with all of its rewards to offer. I believe that that in itself is an erroneous position. You can get wonderfully happy people who are not necessarily deeply religious. I think spirituality helps, in my view, to a certain extent, and that gets linked with your point on needs. Because in that process, you begin to realize that it's not your needs which count. And it's really more what you've done and you've given. Now, if you've understood also and believe and I think this is where the research comes in important, that your really deep moments of happiness are when you give, then you may still have your needs, but you've also done more than your share of giving. And that is what, in my view, is really the CA. It doesn't necessarily mean that you suppress and deprive yourself of things which could be also honest pleasures while you're at it. So I think that's where I'd put the balance. I'm not saying that people need to become monks in that process of saying I have limited needs. I think we can all lead a very normal life. also have certain pleasures which we take, enjoy ourselves, but different spectrum that may fit in for different people in different degrees. As long as you're doing more than your share of giving also side by side.
Thank you. We have time for one last
yes,
question.
Something what Anuj was saying about the happiness country index. So what they say is that the Scandinavian countries and the Singapore, which there's a surety of laws and compliance. So that also brings in some kind of happiness and merit-based society also. So something another colleague was saying here. So the truthfulness and all that, those factors also bring in happiness.
Sure.
And what I believe in our society, if we have incentive-based laws, to follow something, there's some incentives, rather than a punishment-based system, that could be better off. And lastly, whatever events are happening in the country, they are all people don't have good moral characters. So that is something which is missed in the education, and later on also not recognized, and not recognized in the country also.
Sure.
So
I'm going to have fun. I don't have any disagreements with you except what I had already stated earlier, that I'm very wary of those indices. And I think what is really relevant here, I think what is important for happiness at a country level is building that social capital, which you said is probably very high in those countries which get a very high rating. What is really relevant, and I think is important for all of us, if we all are leading happy lives and you put the sigma up, you'll say the gross natural happiness of this country is higher than somebody else's. It may then be very difficult to measure. So it's really important to build this up at an individual level. Let's each one of us seek this for ourselves. Genuinely ask yourself what makes you happy and work towards life. I want to leave one other thing in the context of issues of luck. There's, just as you asked, is happiness something that can be learned? Another research may say that, look, happiness is so genetic. What am I to do if I've, in a sense, got the wrong genes which have this thing? So one research indicates that it's 50% genetic. But the balance, 50% is very much in your own hands, out of which maybe 10% is based on what experiences you've had. I actually disagree even with that. And I just look back at very close families I've known. And I see so much difference. They've got the same genes. Have had similar opportunities. And yet I see such a huge variation in happiness levels within those people that I'm inclined to feel that actually we have 75% within our hands and 25% is genetic. So, but there's not based on research, it's based on limited perception. But that's the thought I'd like to leave you with. That is really for us to make of ourselves what we can do with our own lives in terms of maximizing happiness.
Thank you. So I just want to wrap this up and thank all of you. To wrap up, I just wanted to share two thoughts that I came in with on the definition of happiness and success, and Mr. Soota has added many more to that. I have looked at happiness as, think of it as a Rubik's Cube. It's got financial security on one side, it's got health on another side, it's got family on the third side, it's got society or your friends and relatives on the fourth side, and fifth and sixth, whatever you like, your hobbies, your passion, etc. You have to balance all of them. And if you ever played with the Rubik's Cube, if you try to set the red color, but you mess up the white color, it's not going to work. You've not fixed it. If you fix the white color but mess up the blue color, it doesn't work. So you have all of these aspects is something you have to balance out. Make sure when you're fiddling with one color, the other one's not going too off the radar. So then, that's kind of the Rubik's Cube of happiness of life for me. On success, there's another saying that somebody had shared with me many years ago, which is, and this in the context of is success only iconic people? Is it material success? Or what is it for you yourself? Success defined as to live your life in your own way, to reach the goals that you have set for yourself, and to be the person that you choose to be and that you want to be. That is the only measure of success. Thank you. So with these words, I want to end the session. Thank you, Mr. Soota, for coming down all the way from Bangalore to be with us today. And thank you for all of us, to all of you, for listening to us and being a very participative audience. Thank you.